You can find all the deck lists in the video and more at the link in the description down below. Let's get started. Pioneer is popping and there are plenty of pilots playing, so let's take a look at a few decks that are a little off the beaten path in the format from this weekend's challenges, as well as some of the decks some of my fellow creators played at the Magic the Gathering Online Creator Showdown. Let's start off by taking a look at some of those Creator Showdown decks, since there was some nice spice that got played throughout that tournament, including a list from the fellows over at Crew 3 MTG that really sparked my interest. A 5-color humans deck using Collected Company like it's pre-Horizons Modern was not something I had on my radar for the Pioneer format post Tarkir Dragonstorm. The deck even goes as deep as to run an old Tarkir favorite in Mantis Rider, alongside things like Reflector Mage, Experiment 1, and of course, Thalia's Lieutenant, in a package that really makes me wish there was an Aether Vial in the format. Now, besides playing the greatest human hits from the decades of Magic's past, the deck has a very particularly strong synergy with new Tarkir Dragonstorm human, Songcrafter Mage. Now, this Temur, Snapcaster, and a cosplay allows you to give Collected Company Harmonize, which is essentially a flashback and convoke hybrid, reducing its generic mana cost by the power of the creature you tap to harmonize with it. So Songcrafter Mage can be hit off of Collected Company and then give that same Collected Company harmonize, then tap itself to reduce your Collected Company down to just a singleton green mana. So you can do it all over again. It's a pretty powerful end of turn on your opponent's turn thing to do for 5 mana altogether. Now, Felithar, Dawn of the Abzan, is another TDM card that acts as another Anthem type effect for your board, but it does require something to be sacrificed in order to use it. So playing it off of a Collected Company on a blank board isn't the greatest. It'll just pump up nothing at that point. But it works very well if you happen to have a map token floating around from Kellen Daring Traveler. Now, overall, the deck looks pretty fun, even adding another Dragonstorm card in Surrak Elusive Hunter to have a cocoable sideboard Shaper's Sanctuary effect on your creatures against targeted removal, as well as counter magic, because it's when it targets a creature's spell, so it can be on the stack as well. Now, I don't think this list is truly refined yet, and I'd love to see more of the Songcrafter Mages to really abuse the synergy with Collected Company in and of itself, and then maybe swap around some of the 1 and 2 drops to be a little bit more powerful. And I'm also not a huge fan of Mantis Rider in the year of our Lord and Savior Richard Garfield PhD 2025. So I do think that there are a couple of choices you could kind of go for that may be a little bit better than what Crew 3 has put together, but overall, a 5-color Collected Company humans deck in Pioneer has the tools to be a very powerful thing. Now, content creator and Magic the Gathering online grinder Claudioh brought another blast from the past archetype back to the tables of Pioneer with Dimir Dragons, a control deck that was popular in Standard in our last romp around the plane of Tarkir. Now, relying on the power of 2 new dragons to not only end the game, but also build around here with synergies, Scavenger Regent gives you a one-sided Wrath effect as long as you have only dragons on the board, and as long as you have enough mana to pump into its Omen side effect, while also being a really solid creature with a tough ward cost on curve. Now, Merengue River Regent, either way, a giant blue flying dragon is the other one in the deck, acting as a way to bounce 2 things in addition to being just a very powerful 6/7 flying body. Now, the Omen side of this, Coil and Catch, is not only a lot easier to pronounce, but also works as a replacement for other card selection spells in a compulsive research-esque way, drawing 3 and discarding 1 at instant speed. Now, the rest of the deck is a Dimir control shell that does kind of upgrade or side grade some of the cards into their new Behold counterparts, such as Caustic Exhale being a 3/3 -3/3 spell at 1 mana if you behold a dragon, and Dispelling Exhale being an above rate mana leak if you have the same clause. And then you also get to run the older versions of the behold spells that don't actually say behold, they just have the full text on there, like Silumgar's Scorn is basically a hard counterspell, and Fautongue Invocation as a sacrifice blot out type effect that can gain new life if you have a dragon. Now, Shark Typhoon and Restless Reef allow us to end the game with sharks instead of dragons if we need to, even adding an extra shark in Chromhost Seed Shark from the sideboard, as well as an alternate win condition in Ashiok Nightmare Muse if you need more out of the sideboard from this control deck. Now, the last of these decks from the Showdown event that I want to mention is the one that actually knocked me out of the event in round number 4 on stream, unfortunately. A match that I did wind up highlighting on my video from Monday by pilot AlbertoSD. Now, the Orzhov mid-range shell is built around maximizing what Ketramose can do while still being able to put threats on the board and pressure your opponent with the heaviest hitters that Black and White has to offer in Pioneer. Now, the combination of Overlord of the Baelmeric alongside Gurmag Angler allows you to put a big 5/5 on board as early as turn number 3, while the impending threat will play alongside it in about 4 turns, like around turn 6 from there. Now, Vanishing Verse, Dreams of Steel and Oil, Cling to Dust, Portable Hole, all of these are removal spells that wind up helping, or disruption spells that wind up helping Ketramose start swinging as early as possible. And all of these, you only need one of them alongside a fully delved out Gurmag Angler to be able to turn Ketramose online. And you also have a singleton copy of Murderous Cut to deal with pretty much every creature in the Pioneer format, while adding multiple cards towards that Ketramose clause to get it attacking and blocking. Now, Graveyard Trespasser looks the best it has in a very long time with Ketramose in tow, while cards like Go Blank help out with that a ton, exiling graveyards, and then Invoke Despair don't give the exile clause, but the sideboard cards come in to give the deck the grindy aspect it needs in mid-range and control matchups. Now, this deck was awesome to see in action. It kicked my butt, and I suggest giving it a whirl while you're trying out Ketramose in every single format possible. Swapping on over to some decks from the challenges, we have this one that I know a few people personally would be excited to see doing well, as a mono white Caretaker's Talent won a challenge this weekend in the hands of pilot Azatoyellow, with a few tweaks to the cards being played to maximize a couple of new additions from Tarkir Dragonstorm. First off, we have United Battlefront, a sorcery speed collected company effect that allows for any non-creature, non-land permanent to hit the battlefield so long as it's a mana value of 3 or less. This means anything from the namesake of Caretaker's Talent to Wedding Announcement to even removal spells like Perilous Snare are all fair game to ETB and start flooding your side of the battlefield with permanents that you can then activate Nykthos Shrine to Nyx to generate a ton of white mana from. Now, sagas like Birth of Meletus and the Restoration of Aganjo give you multiple turns of value, in addition to costing just enough to be hit by Unified Battlefront. That works out very well. Now, the other new card that can't be hit by our new Coco effect, but plays so nicely with the rest of the deck it'd be a shame to leave out, is Elspeth Stormslayer. This Planeswalker gives you an anointed procession, basically, as its passive for all your token generating effects, turning Wedding Announcement into 6 power of tokens pre-flip, and Carrot Cake into 2, making your Anthem effects into game enders, not to mention being a flying Anthem effect in and of herself. So this is a Yorion list after all, so we have a bunch of different things and the Sky Noodle in our sideboard, which means that we can always blink the things with our Yorion, have Elspeth trigger yet again, and just generate tons of value from just adding this companion and maximizing the amount of cards in our deck, while the rest of our sideboard allows us to pack in plenty of hate pieces, as well as hiding a couple of non-unified battlefrontable cards in there, such as Beza the Bounding Spring and Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, which, alongside Elspeth, might make you need a separate box for all the potential tokens you'll be making. Now, pilot BMadMan brought a Boros Monument list to the Pioneer Challenges that uses Discard Matters cards like Marauding Mako alongside its namesake Monument to Endurance to dish out damage to opposing players and just cause a lot of painful triggers to happen. Now, plenty of discard enablers from Guardian of New Benalia to Seasoned Hollowblade, Fear of Missing Out, and even Inti Seneschal of the Sun are all on board to help Monument stay generating value, while cards like Recommission allow you to bring back any of the creatures that you've discarded for value, as well as being able to reanimate any monuments that you've discarded or anything that has been destroyed after it's been resolved or counterspelled. Now, Fiery Temper makes the cut in the main deck, as the madness aspect of this allows it to literally just become Lightning Bolt, stacking up damage in a turn with Monument in play. Now, Phyrexian Dragon Engine can give you basically as many discard triggers as you have cards in hand, so having at least 3 is pretty good value to get everything from your Monument, while presenting a solid double striking body that you don't really care about dying, because you kind of want to unearth this thing anyway. So if you had to hard cast it, you bring it back, something like that, unearthing it is still a very powerful thing to do when it's in your graveyard. Now, the sideboard from this deck does give you some more interactive elements and makes the deck potentially a little more grindy, with copies of the Wandering Emperor, Dampening Sphere, and Portable Hole, among other ways to stop your opponent's threats. Now, Pilot NikkuNiku had a bit of a different take on the unified Battlefront deck idea, this time using its ability to play a bunch of non-creature permanents to power out an early Rottenmouth Viper, the way that the Rakdos and Dimir style of decks have been doing previously. Rakdos in sort of sacrifice shell, and Dimir in sort of an artifacts matter type shell. Now, while the Viper coming out early enough can be pretty powerful, Niku's deck has far less hits in it, with the Battlefront even being a Yorion deck. It might not even want to run the card at all, as opposed to just being a pure value deck with Viper in it. Now, a similar package of Caretaker's Talent and Wedding Announcement are joined by some main deck hate, such as Authority of the Consuls and removal in the form of Nowhere to Run, as well as card advantage from everybody's favorite version of Phyrexian Arena, Unholy Annex. Now, there are a lot more spells in this version of the deck, including Vanishing Verse, Banishing Slash, and 2 copies of the Wandering Emperor to give it more of a mid-range style feel to the deck, which also makes the kind of hits off of the unified Battlefront a little bit lower, like I was mentioning before. So this one kind of has that as a nice to have, whereas the previous list was using it for pure value for the majority of its deck and its game plan. I think a lot of times that this version of the Orzhov deck with the Viper is going to really be winning games. It's off the power of the individual pieces and not by putting multiple into play off of a unified Battlefront. And then last but not least, this deck that's had a few versions floating around and is something that I'm looking forward to trying out a lot in this format. Now, I couldn't find one of the lists I was specifically looking to find, but Pilot Special Boy took a spin on revitalizing the Izzet Prowess style of deck using Cori Steel Cutter as the latest addition, which creates an army of Prowess Monk tokens alongside things like Monastery Swiftspear and Slick Shot Show Off is back in Pioneer, baby, while playing tons of cantrips and some pump spells to push through the damage. Now, Special Boy's list does kind of draw back a little bit more to some of the traditional Prowess style decks and looks to leverage of one mind in a way that these decks have previously done, as Slick Shot Show Off qualifies as a non-human for this discount and also runs Treasure Cruise as, you know, basically the absolute best kind of cruise deck in the format. Maybe Izzet Phoenix is still a little bit better, but the fact that this deck can easily fill its graveyard with cantrips and 1-mana pump spells over time, then refuel with the powerful Delve spell and continue to make its entire board huge with Prowess triggers is something that Treasure Cruise hasn't been able to do in the format since Expressive Iteration was banned. Now, other versions of this deck have branched out into cards like Stormwing Entity to have a stronger flying threat, while some decks have opted for Ledger Shredder to synergize with the Flurry mechanic coming out from Cori Steel Cutter. I personally am interested in a list that I played against last week in a league when testing and was utilizing Stormchaser's talent and This Town Ain't Big Enough alongside the Cutter for a deck that traded like the initial upfront burst of speed for a ton of lasting strength if a game went a little bit longer than usual. You could utilize your This Town loop to bounce your Stormchaser's talent and something from your opponent's side of the board, and then recast the Stormchaser's talent that triggers your Cori Steel Cutter that gets you another monk token that now has prowess and haste because the Cutter equips over to that. And if you had a previous monk token, you have 2 prowess triggers on top of that. Anything else on your board is already 1 or 2 power as well. So you have these 3 to 4 power threats that are swinging in just for doing your This Town loop in a deck that puts up a lot of damage as quickly or quicker than you would expect from basically nowhere. Now, either way that you wind up building this, I do think that the Cutter in this type of Izzet shell is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the coming weeks of Pioneer, especially when you can sideboard into cards like Third Path Iconoclast or Young Pyromancer to really get the board flooded with those tokens. So that's a look at the Pioneer format in the immediate wake of Tarkir Dragonstorm and a showcasing of decks from the Creator Showdown. So is there something that stuck out to you? Or maybe you're brewing your own list and you think that you've cracked the format? Let me know in the comments down below, and feel free to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed this type of content, going over multiple different lists, trying to find something a little bit new to play in the format. Now, if you like this and my other videos, especially on the Pioneer format, then you may feel free to look over and consider if you would like to become a member to my channel, such as the fine folks over here. Haha, movie magic there. But in return, you can get access to member benefits such as early access to content, Discord access, and things like personal deck text from myself. You can just click join down below the video or back on the home main page of my channel in order to show your devotion. And if you haven't already, just tap that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all the latest deck techs, metagame analysis, and just in general, Magic the Gathering content from me. See you later.